This tower is made from 243 tons of coral rock. A child can shut this 9-ton gate with one finger. Furniture, walls, and objects of art, all carved from dense gray coral and moved into place as if by magic. By most calculations, it would take an army of skilled workers years to complete this task. It is astonishing to know that all this was a 28-year labor of love by one man with a collection of homemade tools and a 4th-grade education. His name was Edward Leedskalnin, king of the Coral Castle. Cross this threshold to places of mystery. This is Homestead, Florida. In 1992, Hurricane Andrew leveled the city. But the fierce winds that shattered modern stores, homes, and offices as if they were paper mache couldn't blow a pebble from this marvel of construction.
Just reminded me of the 7 wonders of the world, like Stonehenge or the pyramids.
Completed in 1930, this solid rock Valentine to unrequited love draws visitors from around the world.
People seem to fall in love with the place.
Yet, its very existence defies explanation.
It's quite a mystery, and it still is a mystery.
The greatest mystery of the Coral Castle has always been its creator, Edward Leedskalnin.
How did he do this? How did he perform fantastic feats of engineering single-handedly?
When I later learned that it was one man, one small man, I was in disbelief. I couldn't imagine it being done.
And while scientists and engineers scratch their heads and wonder how the Coral Castle came to pass, many believe the man who served as king in this fairy tale-like setting had special unearthly powers. Kay Vikas has been a tour guide at the castle for 25 years.
He just had this special gift, but he said he knew the secret of weight and leverage, and he knew the way the pyramids were built.
This would seem to be the work of a giant, but Ed Leedskalnin always defied belief.
He was a small man, only weighed 95 pounds. He never weighed over 100 in his whole life. And he always walked around with his head up like he was a tall person.
The Coral Castle is an engineering mystery that has puzzled experts for 60 years, but the early life of its creator provides clues to its origins. Edward Leedskalnin was born in 1887 in a small village near Riga, Latvia. He was the son of a hard-working farmer and knew at an early age the meaning of back-breaking work. When Ed left the farm, he was already a well-established mason and bricklayer, and at age 26, he knew it was time to start a family on his own. Ed proposed to the love of his life, Agnes Scuffs, who he lovingly referred to as Sweet 16. Agnes accepted the proposal, only to decide that Ed was too old for her and too poor. She abruptly called off the wedding on the eve of their nuptials. Ed was crushed and slipped into depression.
He believed you loved once in your life, and he was very heartbroken when she left him, and he never did marry. As far as we know, he never even had another girlfriend while he was here.
In 1913, spurned by the love of his life and publicly humiliated to his fellow villagers, Ed had nowhere to turn, so he set his sights on America, perhaps to find adventure, but certainly to heal his broken heart.
He traveled around for a few years. He went to California, Texas. He worked on the cattle drive.
But it was a bitter winter in Canada as a lumberjack that took its toll on Ed's health.
He picked up a touch of TB, and he heard Florida would be good weather year-round, so he settled on 1 acre in Florida City. He started to make furniture of the coral that we're on. We're on solid coral here, a couple of inches of soil, 4,000 feet of coral.
But before Ed would begin the undertaking of what was to be his life's work, he made many trips to the local library. Although Ed only had a 4th grade education, his thirst for knowledge was insatiable. He was often found in the library poring through the books about the Great Pyramids. It seems impossible that Ed Leedskalnin could divine the secrets that have stumped archaeologists and engineers for thousands of years. But armed with new knowledge, Ed began carving ancient dead coral out of his acre of land. The blocks he raised out of the ground were massive, some weighing as much as 30 tons. What is even more amazing is that the simple chain and tackle blocks he was using could lift only 10 tons. He accomplished this with nothing more than homemade tools, or so the legend goes.
The neighbors were so amazed to see him move these rocks and make furniture and so forth. When they'd ask him how he could do it, he would just answer. He knew the secret of weight and leverage and knew the way the pyramids were built. He never let anyone see him work. He often worked at night under lantern.
It is thought that his heart was so badly broken that only something as immense and consuming as the castle could cure him.
You see, he made beds and chairs and all kinds of things. He said it was his imaginary world for the family he never had.
One of Ed's most outstanding testimonials of his enduring love for Agnes is the 5,000-pound love table.
The Feast of Love table is a big heart and a small heart in the center. It's 2.5 tons. It's in Ripley's Museum in St. Augustine, a replica of it. Believe it or not. We usually had a wedding for every year that I can remember on Valentine's Day there.
Ed's preoccupation with secrecy is well documented. Even the windows of his living quarters were constructed so that Ed could peer out, but it was difficult to see in. And when the Florida City Chamber of Commerce approved a new building subdivision to go in next to Ed's half-built castle, Ed knew it was time to move. And so, for perhaps the first time in Ed's life, he asked for help.
He had a local farmer, Bob Biggers, haul most of the coral pieces up from the 1 acre with his tractor. Ed had a homemade trailer. It was a chassis from an old Republic truck with rails mounted on it. When no one was looking, Ed would load and unload.
And there's yet another sad theory why Ed decided to pull up stakes and move his coral kingdom. One afternoon, Ed found himself surrounded by thugs, determined to beat the secret out of him. At 5 feet tall and 100 pounds, Ed could only endure the savage beating. In the end, the hooligans spared his life. It might even be said that Ed won the fight, because the secret he was willing to die for remains intact to this day.
He took the secret to the grave with him. All he left behind was his legacy, the castle itself.
When we return, modern engineers offer amazing theories as they attempt to solve the mystery of Ed Leedskalnin and the Coral Castle. Florida's Coral Castle is an enigma that has defied and fascinated experts for 60 years. Christopher Dunn is an aerospace engineer and is considered an authority on the Great Pyramids as well as the Coral Castle. Dunn's extensive background in physics and engineering has brought him to the conclusion that traditional notions of how the pyramids were built may be a gross oversimplification of something much more sophisticated.
The theories that are proposed by Egyptologists do not necessarily fit the evidence. Ed Leedskalnin claimed that he knew the secrets of how the pyramids were built. And because I was on a long line of people who actually question conventional theories about the pyramids, I decided I would actually go and research Ed Leedskalnin.
What Dunn discovered at the Coral Castle still amazes him to this day.
The 9-ton swinging gate, a 18,000-pound rock with a perfectly round, straight hole drilled through the center of it that pivots perfectly with just the touch of a finger.
Careful.
Engineers have looked at that for years, wondering, just how he was able to do that.
In fact, the 9-ton gate needed servicing after a mere 60 years of use. It took a crew of 10 and a 20-ton crane just to get at the delicate yet sturdy bearing the gate rode on. But even modern equipment couldn't improve on Ed's original design.
When they got it back together, it was not perfect anymore. They could not get it perfected.
But Dunn's admiration for Ed extends throughout the castle. For him, it's one astonishing achievement of art and function after the next.
The 30-ton rock, that's an amazing feat. The Polaris telescope, it's a very heavy rock with a hole drilled like a gun sight in the center of it. And you can actually view Polaris.
So how did the little man from Latvia cut, move, position, and maneuver such colossal pieces of rock? Christopher Dunn's theories border on engineering heresy.
In my opinion, it's not possible without actually making the stone lighter or reducing the gravitational pull on the stone. And I believe that Ed Leedskalnin has been able to do that.
What Dunn suggests, that Ed implemented an anti-gravitational construction tool, may smack of science fiction hocus pocus. But the engineer firmly believes the evidence of Ed's mysterious device is actually hiding in plain sight and can be seen in this rare photo of Ed at work.
In the picture, you'll see some tripods that were made out of telephone poles. On the top of the tripods are these boxes. And leading from the boxes, you'll see a cable coming down to the block. I believe that he had in the boxes radio tuners. What he was doing was actually transmitting from his workshop, and he was working with the resonance of the block, the resonance of the atoms, of course, in the block. He was working with electromagnetism.
If one believes the theory of radio tuners realigning the electromagnetism of these huge coral blocks, then where did the power come from? In Ed's workshop far in the back, there is a very primitive yet powerful electrical generator built out of junkyard parts. Dunn suggests that this was Ed's source for producing the electricity needed to achieve the atom realignment chain reaction. Dunn goes on to suggest that the chain block and tackle supposedly used were nothing more than a ruse, a prop, to throw off the looky-loos curious to discover Ed's secret.
If you'll see in the photographs, you have a tripod and you don't see a block and tackle anywhere. The block and tackle is only designed to lift 10 tons. So there's a little shortfall there between 10 tons and 30 tons and actually performing the work.
Perhaps this theory of atom tampering explains how Ed was able to work with such incredible weight and avoid being crushed to death. Jorge Rivera is a structural engineer in Los Angeles. Although he subscribes to conventional theories of how Ed might have built his castle, he is still amazed by the scope and danger of such an undertaking.
I design and build skyscrapers in areas with high seismicity. These are life-threatening situations that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I couldn't imagine him completing the project without having killed himself. I mean, we're talking about lifting pieces of block that are 13,000 pounds, 16,000 pounds, up 30 feet, and somehow precisely landing these things on top of other blocks. And the tools he used, the primitiveness of them, it's truly unbelievable. I mean, unimaginable that such a man could do that without hurting himself.
The fact that Ed Leedskalnin survived his monumental undertaking is a factor that Christopher Dunn takes into account as a possible added piece of evidence that Ed was working outside the lines of any known construction methods.
It's dangerous work, working with such large blocks of stone, because they're so heavy. But if they're not that heavy, and in fact if they can be moved like a balloon, then you take the danger out of the project. One of the legends is that some children actually spotted Ed Leedskalnin with a rock floating in the air like a hydrogen balloon, and that was the description.
Although the engineers may disagree on just how Ed built his coral castle, one constant remains evident: the castle itself.
This castle is comprised of roughly 2,200,000 pounds of coral. That would be 1,100 tons. Just thinking about those kind of numbers, the fact that one man over 20 years was able to move, carve, build a castle is unthinkable. I did some calculations on projects of similar size that I'm currently working on. It would basically take something like 20 to 30 people working for 2 to 3 years straight to build such a thing.
There have been several estimates of what it would take to build the Great Pyramid. They range from 10,000 people to 100,000. But if they had only 4,700 Ed Leedskalnins, they could build the Great Pyramid at the same time.
The arguments over how Ed built his bizarre complex of coral will undoubtedly rage on.
Yeah, this is pretty comfortable.
So will the public's fascination with the coral castle and the enduring mystery of its creator.
The imagination that this man had. Cool. It amazes me.
When we come back, is this lifestyle guide written by Leedskalnin himself actually a code book for the castle's secrets? Since its completion in 1940, Florida's Coral Castle has been a popular tourist destination. Ed Leedskalnin's favorite visitors were the many children that would come to see him.
If the kids come around, he'd show them around. He loved children, and he made that playground for them in there, the story of the 3 bears. And he'd cook hot dogs for them in his cooker.
It also drew the attention of the U.S. government. After an exhaustive study of the castle, Colonel Carroll Lake of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was quoted as saying, "Leedskalnin proved to all the world to see today that he knew the secrets of the ancients." But Ed did not always welcome Uncle Sam's visits.
The government had paid him visits on numerous occasions and had walked away none the wiser for what he was doing. He had a particular mindset that was distrustful. He was afraid that his technology or his techniques would be abused or misused, and that's why he kept it to himself.
Ed believed in the power of the universe. As a stargazer and a student of the heavenly bodies, he often spoke of the harmony of the universe, and was so taken with the Floridian night skies that an entire section of his rock garden is dedicated to the carvings of the Moon, Mars, and Saturn. Leedskalnin believed a man should work between the hours of 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. And he created this sundial to record that time span. It's accurate within 2 minutes. Ed was also a philosopher and wrote a book entitled A Book in Every Home. At first glance, it seems to be a message to Agnes, the love of his life.
He writes that his girl had to be perfect. I don't think he would have ever accepted her if she ever did come over. I think he would have liked her to come and see him and say, "Yes, I had you in mind, but it's too late now."
But depending on who you ask, the meaning of Ed's prose and verse vary greatly.
It's a very unusual book, and it's full of sexist comments about the role of women in society, and it's really odd. I mean, it doesn't make much sense when you read it. So I was thinking, well, what if it's a huge metaphor? What if Ed is actually saying how to raise a young lady, meaning how to raise a large block of stone?
Is this a code book containing Leedskalnin's engineering secrets? Unfortunately, like so much of Ed Leedskalnin's life, the answer would be forever sealed on a hot Floridian summer afternoon. It was December 7th, 1951. Uncharacteristically, Ed shut down his tours for a day and hung a note on the entrance to the castle. It read, "Going to hospital." He rode his bike to the bus stop and boarded the bus to Miami. He died 3 days later from malnutrition.
Not because he didn't have the food. There was plenty of food, but it was just that he just didn't seem to want to eat a lot in his later years.
When the Dade County coroners performed an autopsy on Ed's body, they were startled to find no signs of the tuberculosis that had plagued him most of his life. It is believed that love has no boundaries, and wherever it exists, all things are possible. For the people that have spent nearly a lifetime studying and preserving the Coral Castle, one absolute truth is evident about the mysterious man and his house of coral.
I think somewhere in his mind, he probably believed that his sweet 16 would suddenly wake up and realize what a mistake that she had made and come and find him. Unfortunately, for him, that never happened.
After being here all these years, I can say that no greater love that I've seen that a man would have for a woman.
Had Edward Leedskalnin really learned the secrets of ancient Egypt? Had he mastered the laws of physics? Some might say he simply tapped into a force older than the pyramids themselves, building this castle with the strength born of heartache and the power of eternal love.